Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 207. Welcome to All About Breastfeeding, the place where the girls hang out. I am your host, Lori Jill Eisenstadt, IBCLC, which stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, and I help moms with breastfeeding. If you would like to find out more about how I can help you or the services that I provide in helping moms with breastfeeding, all you need to do is go to aabreastfeeding.com. I am very happy that you've chosen to spend some more time hanging out with me today, learning all you can about breastfeeding. I've received a few emails this week and another fabulous review in iTunes, all from moms letting me know how helpful this show has been. And from time to time, I really like to publicly thank each and every one of you. The few emails that I got this week are about my ebook titled The New Mother's Survival Guide, Practical Tips for the Fourth Trimester. It is gaining a following, and I want to share some of the reviews I received about this book. So Jessica said, Lori is very knowledgeable. Her expertise has certainly helped me prepare for the first few months at home with a new baby. This ebook is power-packed with great ideas and gave me a heads up about things I never, ever would have thought of. Her checklists really helped me get organized. Thanks, Jessica. That is what I hope to do, help you prepare and help you get organized. Sophia writes, Lori shares a lot of tips and tricks on preparing your household for a newborn. I thought I had all the information I needed until I learned more from Lori. So thankful for all the handouts that also made it easy for my husband to help prepare. Yes, and that's another thing I hope to do, to help your husband or significant other. They love checklists. It's a lot better than just saying, oh, this weekend we need to take care of such and such. Give them a checklist and you're more likely to get things done. And lastly, Ada said, I was feeling quite overwhelmed with my to-do list, and now I feel ready for the birth. My partner even notices how much calmer I am now that I've implemented many of the suggestions made in this book. Thank you, Lori. Oh, and that is music to my ears also. I love nothing better than hearing that some really good practical tips and implementing them have you be a little bit more calmer as you wait for your baby. So thanks for that, ladies. If you would like to have a copy of this book, all you need to do is go to allaboutmothering.com and you will see a link for the book that you can access immediately. I was also happy to see the latest review that a listener left me in iTunes. As you know, I love it when I get reviews for this show. It's just, getting that pat on the back that we all love to get when we work hard at something. Acknowledging that we're making a difference in someone's life. For me, finding out that the information I'm providing you with, that it's being helpful for you, well, that really goes a long, long way and keeps a smile on my face. Thanks so much to this listener who calls herself One Challenged Mama. And I'm going to read to you what she said. I never write reviews, but I definitely read them when I'm deciding what to buy, what to listen to, or where to go or do. I'm so thankful that others took the time to review this podcast. Because of those reviews, I stumbled upon it when my son was about 2 weeks old, and I was at a point of desperation. It was such a difficult period for us. We had many issues with breastfeeding. High weight loss, poor weight gain, chronic spitting up, and tongue and lip ties. I found so much comfort in the episodes, hearing that I wasn't a failure, that many other mothers struggled with the same issues we were having, and that ultimately everything would be okay. I would literally listen to the podcast all night long during our feeding marathons. Lori has such a calming demeanor, and she covers so many topics extensively. Through the podcast, she kept me company when everyone I knew was asleep and offered the encouragement I needed to stay the course and keep my cool as we struggled through the early weeks. I consider these episodes an invaluable resource for breastfeeding, and my only wish is that I found the podcast sooner. Thank you, Lori, for the work that you do. I hope that you can continue to help others as you have helped us. One Challenged Mama, thank you so much for the review, and it's music to my ears. One reason why I do the podcast, and a huge motivating factor to just keep it going. Learning that I'm helping moms such as you, I'm keeping you company during the nighttime. I always say, wow, I wish that I had this podcast when I was struggling with my first baby, and the nights just seem so much longer and more depressing than the daytime does when you're having such struggles. And the other thing that I really like what you said is that you're hearing that you're not a failure, and I want every mom to know that no matter how breastfeeding goes, you're trying, you're giving it your best. There's no way that I would ever use the words failure. I just know that you're struggling, you're reaching out for help, and I'm glad that I'm able to be a person that's able to provide that for you. So thank you so much, One Challenged Mama. And for anybody else, all you need to do is go to iTunes, open up the podcast all about breastfeeding, and I would be thrilled as anything for you to leave a review. So today, in Season 6 of All About Breastfeeding, we have been working our way through the theme, Birth Matters. Where you give birth, how you give birth, when you give birth, who you give birth with. It all has an impact on our breastfeeding journey. And a quick recap of the previous shows in the series titled Birth Matters. The previous shows, they're between episode number 195 and today's show number 207. We've talked about the impact that postpartum, hemorrhage, premature birth, birth trauma, birth interventions, who you give birth with, how all of this has an impact on your breastfeeding experience. In last week's show, I talked about how important it is that you feel good about your birth experience. It is unrealistic to think that all of us can take a childbirth class, write up the birth plan of our dreams, and expect our birth to go exactly as planned. While it does for some, for most of us, birth unfolds and we realize pretty quickly that having control over every aspect of our birth is quite unrealistic. The message that I conveyed last week is that how you birth can have a direct impact on early breastfeeding. My hope is that as a laboring woman, you are surrounded by caregivers who will work closely with you to have the birth you desire. When things get tough and the need to change your plans happens, my hope is that your caregivers will include you in the decision-making process. This is your birth, and no matter what kind of birth you ultimately have, whether it's medicated, unmedicated, forceps or vacuum assisted, whether you have an episiotomy, a vaginal or cesarean section, my hope is that you feel a part of the decision-making team and that your voice is heard and respected. In my many years that I've worked with women, I've learned that how they feel about their birth is more important than whether or not they had the birth they dreamed of. Women need to feel supported, need to feel cared for. We need to feel part of the decision-making process as birth unfolds. Above all, new mothers need to feel respected and empowered during our birth. And in my latest interview, episode number 206 and 208, it was a two-parter with my guest Jennifer, Well, she talks about how emotional she felt about her birth not going the way she planned. She felt like her body failed in her labor. She said because of this, she really needed for breastfeeding to go well. When it didn't, she really felt the huge emotional impact on the relationship between her birth and breastfeeding. If you have not listened to Jennifer's interview, go back and listen to it later as she illustrates so well how this affected her. Between today's show and next week's show, I'm going to make a few references to a book that I really like. If you have really liked our theme this season, Birth Matters, you will really like this book. It's titled Impact of Birthing Practices on Breastfeeding, and it's authored by Mary Kroger with Linda Smith. In her book, Mary examines the bond between the new mother and her newborn from the perspective of labor, birth, and breastfeeding, and looks more closely at labor mechanics and interventions and how those affect breastfeeding. Mary addresses the failure of both Western and developing country breastfeeding promoters and supporters to link the relationship of certain childbirth interventions with the readiness of the mother or newborn to breastfeed. I've had the opportunity to witness firsthand how birth impacts early breastfeeding. Of course, I have my own experience, but I have hundreds of others to go on. Observing mothers in hospitals, birthing centers, and at home births, it has been quite eye-opening for me. I have attended these births as a friend, as a birth doula, and as a lactation consultant. I have witnessed firsthand many of the situations that Mary talks about in her book. Today, I would like to highlight one very important area that I feel we are still lacking in and that doesn't get enough attention. I am referring to the baby-friendly designation that hospitals earn. New parents rely heavily on the place where they give birth to be able to assist with early newborn breastfeeding. The staff there needs to be knowledgeable enough to help moms. After all, if you've never breastfed before, you will likely need help and will likely have many questions when your baby's born. It is very easy and it takes very little time to open up a bottle and demonstrate to parents good bottle feeding techniques. It takes knowledge and time and skill to help new mothers in the early days of breastfeeding. And it's common for new moms to have so many questions in the early days of breastfeeding. Some of the common questions: how do I know my baby has a good latch? How do I know when my baby's full? Do I offer one-sided a feeding? Both sides? What if they fall asleep in between? How long should my baby feed for? How do I know when my baby's hungry or gassy or they're crying because they're overstimulated? How do I know when my baby's full? How do I know if I have milk? Right now I think I don't have any milk. When does my milk come in? What do I do if my baby won't latch? If my baby is peeing every day, does this mean they're getting enough? That's just a few of the very common questions we get. For years, it was well known that many facilities employed staff that had a varying degree of education in breastfeeding. Some staff who work with new mothers had little to no education. Some used their own experience with breastfeeding and shared this with new mothers. This created inconsistent information to parents. Their common complaints were that one person told them to hold their baby a certain way, and then the next person came in their room and said, "Oh no, don't hold your baby that way. You need to hold your baby this way," and then they showed them something totally different. Some moms were berated because they offered both sides and they're told they were going to overfeed their baby. Then some, same day by someone else, were told they keep their babies on one side for more than a certain amount of minutes, their baby was just using them as a pacifier. As you can imagine, this is confusing to parents and quite frustrating. This lack of standardized care causes parents to leave the hospital in a state of confusion. It was common for me to work closely with a mom during my day shift at the hospital and come in the next morning to see the same mom. I would see several bottles of formula, all with different amounts left in them. And I would say to them, how is breastfeeding going? And there were common responses. Some were like, I couldn't wake her up to feed and it had been 3 hours. So the nurse told me that the baby needed to eat. And if I couldn't wake her up to breastfeed, I needed to give her formula in a bottle. I was told they were concerned about her blood sugars or that she would get jaundiced if she didn't have enough milk. And the consequences to that would mean that the baby would need to go to the nursery and might not be able to go home when I went home. So of course this frightens parents, and so they follow and they do as they're told. Some people are told that at the baby's last weight check, they showed way too much weight loss and they needed to give their baby milk. Some moms are told they didn't have enough milk or they didn't have any milk and their baby was losing too much weight. All of these feedback responses were all very common that I would hear. The Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative, BFHI for short, it was created to address this very problem as well as increase the breastfeeding initiation and duration rates. In order to receive this designation, hospitals need to follow a curriculum, action plans, training, competency verification, along with an on-site survey that facilities need to go through to successfully complete this process in order to be granted a license to use the baby-friendly certification. It was recognized long ago that hospitals and birthing centers could say that they were baby-friendly without really having to show that their staff was trained in basic newborn breastfeeding practices. Now they have to go through this certification process and be able to prove that they've met the requirements. One of the requirements to becoming baby-friendly is to adhere to the 10 Steps to Successful Breastfeeding. This was developed by a team of global experts and consists of evidence-based practices that have been shown to increase breastfeeding initiation and duration rates. Baby-friendly hospitals and birthing facilities must adhere to the 10 steps to receive and retain a baby-friendly designation. And I would like to read to you the 10 steps. 1. Have a written breastfeeding policy that is routinely communicated to all healthcare staff. 2. Train all healthcare staff in the skills necessary to implement this policy. 3. Inform all pregnant women about the benefits and management of breastfeeding. 4. Help mothers initiate breastfeeding within 1 hour of birth. 5. Show mothers how to breastfeed and how to maintain lactation, even if they are separated from their babies. 6. Give infants no food or drink other than breast milk unless medically indicated. 7. Practice rooming in. Allow mothers and infants to remain together 24 hours a day. 9. Encourage breastfeeding on demand. I always hate that word demand. I'd rather think of it to encourage you to breastfeed anytime your baby is opening their mouth, shaking their head from side to side, sticking their tongue out, and kind of looking like they're hungry. 9. Give no pacifiers or artificial nipples to babies who are breastfeeding. 10. Foster the establishment of breastfeeding support groups and refer mothers to them on discharge from the hospital or the birthing center. I would love to say that this has solved all the problems associated with poor breastfeeding management or lack of standardized care. This would all seem so simple, right? And yet, it is not. There is hospital administration turnover, nursing staff turnover. Some hospitals and birth centers have an IBC on staff, some do not. Some have a lactation consultant on staff with just very beginning knowledge base and not much more if they're running into big challenges. When I worked at a large city hospital, parents were told there was an IBCLC on staff 7 days a week. And, oh yes, there was. That was the truth. But the important piece that was missing in this scenario is that during times of budget cuts, we were only there for 2 to 3 hours a day. making it impossible for us to see 15 moms a day. So yes, we were there 7 days a week, but we were not really all that available to you. Probably the biggest issue is that in some facilities, once the certification is received, there's no one ensuring that the policies are being adhered to. Think about your own workplace and policies that are put into place. Whether they are policies that help your workplace run smoothly or help the employees be more productive, or they're for safety reasons, you would like to proudly say that these policies were all being adhered to. However, for various reasons, there's probably a few or more that are being ignored. Maybe they're done somewhat halfway, and maybe others are followed to the T. Perhaps it depends on who is on call that day, whether the boss is in or not. Is it a busy time of year, or do some things just go by the wayside? I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Some facilities where you're going to give birth at are just like that. Others follow baby-friendly to the letter, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, and some do not. As you've listened to moms that I've interviewed, you may recall a fair amount of moms have said something along the lines of, and this hospital was supposed to be baby-friendly, and yet I feel they pushed bottles of formula on me way too soon. Or they said, my baby went to the NICU and no one offered to set me up with a pump, or maybe they gave me one, but nobody explained to me how to use it. I hear from moms all the time who tell me their baby went for a hearing test or to the nursery for a few hours so mom could get some sleep, and their baby came back with a pacifier in their mouth or a bottle of half-drunk formula in the crib. Probably the biggest complaint I continue to hear is, well, it was so confusing because our day nurse told us something about breastfeeding and our night nurse contradicted her. The next day, my pediatrician scolded me for letting my baby fall asleep on my chest, but the lactation consultant the day before encouraged me to keep my baby skin to skin. New parents are sleep deprived. They have a lot going on emotionally and physically after the birth. You're often in and out of the hospital in 1 to 2 days, a birthing center within 6 to 12 hours, and a home birth, your midwife might leave after 6 to 8 hours or even sooner. And you are a bundle of nerves when you're coming home from the center or hospital or being left with your baby for the first time. Very, very common. I would like to suggest to my listeners that are planning on giving birth at a hospital to attend a local breastfeeding group that their hospital offers and make a connection with the lactation consultant. If you cannot find one at your hospital, search for a La Leche League meeting close to you. This is a group of volunteers who meet once a month to offer support to other breastfeeding moms. If you're giving birth at a birthing center, do the same thing. Attend a breastfeeding group at the birthing center. If they don't offer one, ask your midwife or doctor for a referral where you can go in the community to connect to other breastfeeding moms. You're planning a home birth? Ask your midwife for the number of a few other moms who recently gave birth or for a local breastfeeding support group that they either give or refer moms to. Whether hospital, home, or birthing center, I'm going to give you some homework. Here's what I'd like for you to do. Your homework is to connect with five other moms that have given birth in the last month or two who have used your facility or your midwife. Ask them what breastfeeding was like for them. What kind of breastfeeding support did they receive during their pregnancy? What kind of breastfeeding support did they receive within hours or the first few days after their baby was born? What was available to them for the first 2 weeks of breastfeeding? Were all their questions answered? By the time they were discharged from the hospital or by the time they left the birthing center, were their questions answered? Did they feel they had easy access to information once they were home on their own? Were they given a referral list to IBCLCs in their community? I know I sound like a pain in the tush sometimes with suggesting you get all your ducks in a row. But honestly, if you've been listening to the interviews I do with mothers, how many mothers say, I wish I knew so much more. I wish I would have paid more attention before my baby was born. I just assumed breastfeeding would go well, and when it didn't, I just didn't know where to turn to. So I know that I'm sounding like a pain in the tush. But to so many parents, you just think that breastfeeding will just happen. The baby's born, they latch well, and no issues whatsoever. And I'm here to tell you that this happens all the time. And I'm also here to tell you that for every baby that breastfeeds well from the beginning, there's another baby. That baby and that mom have little to big struggles. So I really want you to do your homework assignment because I desperately want you to be prepared in case you are that mom and baby pair that is struggling. I don't want you to fall through the cracks. I really want you to do your due diligence. I know you're getting ready for the birth. I know you're taking childbirth classes, and sometimes that's about all we could think of. But I really want you to place importance on the breastfeeding too. I want you to do your due diligence and find out if the place you're giving birth at or the provider that you're using takes breastfeeding support seriously and is prepared to either provide expert help in the event you have some challenges, or they're giving you a list ahead of time of who you can call if you're struggling. All breastfeeding mothers should be seen by an expert who is checking the baby's latch, offering suggestions when necessary, and educating you on normal newborn breastfeeding behavior. Just think of this. Whether you pay for your birth out of pocket or your insurance covers it, the average vaginal birth with no complications can cost anywhere between $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 to $6,000, depending upon where you live. My attitude is that if you're purchasing something for a few $1,000s, the least you should expect is someone available to answer basic questions correctly and be there for you if you have bigger issues. I know I've given you some homework. Feel free to respond to this post I'm going to put in our Facebook group about this topic. If you're not a part of our group, just go to Facebook and search these 4 words, all about breastfeeding community. Tell us about your experience. I'm going to put a post in asking you, did you listen to episode number 207 where I gave you your homework? Did you do your homework? And what did you learn? What happened when you asked around in your community? Let's get a conversation going. What happened when you asked at your hospital or birthing center? When you asked your midwife or their clients about breastfeeding support? Did you get the answers you were looking for? Did you find out that the support is lacking? I'm encouraging you to go out and do this because I really want you to have a smooth breastfeeding beginning, and knowing your information, knowing your resources in the community, and having a good support system is key. On Monday's show, you will get to hear part 2 of Jennifer Gaskell's interview. Jennifer Gaskell shared with us her hospital experience with breastfeeding, as well as how she overcame her early breastfeeding struggles. And you're going to see a post in the Facebook community about that also, that I encourage people to follow that thread and chime in with their thoughts. Until the next show, bye-bye.